Hi everyone, here we are with the Rings of Power episode 4 breakdown. This is CinemaBigWaves. The episode opens with the stormy beginning of Muriel's nightmare, who performs the blessing ceremony for newly born children. At the end of her nightmare, she sees that the leaves of the white tree are falling like the tears of the gods, and suddenly she faces the fate of Numenor, which will go under the water and collapse like Atlantis. This sequence is very important in two ways. One is that the creators have considered a good start for this episode, and somehow they are saying that in this episode they are going to focus more on the stories of Muriel's decision. And the second is that it describes Numenor's inevitable end, which Tolkien fans are well aware of. So, there are no surprises. There's only a long suspense as to how this terrible event will happen and Numenor will be destroyed with all its glory. Note that we don't see any storyline of the Harfoots at all in this episode. In the next sequence, when the people of Numenor protest the presence of the elves, the blacksmith who had a fight with Halbrand in episode 3 says a dialogue that the elf is plotting.
I say, the queen's either blind or an elf lover, just like her father. Elf lover!
There's a small reference to what Sauron is going to do next, and Tolkien fans know that Sauron comes and whispers in the king's ears and deceives the king. There are two groups in Numenor, mostly anti-elves and a minority who supports the elves. And creators introduce a new character to us in this episode related to this subject. Kemen, son of Pharazôn, who seems to be anti-elf. Kemen gets close to Elendil's daughter, Eärien, and they get attracted to each other. It seems that creators tend to establish drama between Numenorean anti-elves and allies by establishing an emotional connection between Kemen and Eärien. In the next scene, when the queen meets Galadriel, Galadriel is trying to convince Muriel to accompany her to the Southlands to fight Sauron. Queen says with a smile,
"And I suppose Elendil here is a runic emperor."
It's a petty lord, actually.
This sarcastic dialogue actually shows how unlikely it is for the Muriel that one day Elendil becomes king. This contains interesting points for us who know that he is the first king of Gondor. In the next scene, we see Isildur on the ship, and he hears the whisper of his name again. According to the conversation he's having with his friends in the next scene, this could be his mother's voice, but we are still not sure. Maybe it is the voice of destiny, and the makers are playing a trick here, so that we cannot identify exactly whose voice it is. Next, we finally get to see Adar and realize that he's an elf and speaks elvish language. But as an elf, he turned pale, probably because he can't tolerate sunlight like orcs, or because he's drowned into darkness. Adar has burns and scars on his face, which can be caused by the wars he participated in. It is true that we know that Sauron can change his face, but remember that Sauron is a Maiar, but Adar is an elf and is most likely not Sauron. Also, he wears Sauron's gloves, but we have to wait to find out the reason for this later. It is very unlikely that creators reveal Sauron's identity so easily. Adar's dialogue with Arondir is also like Sauron's words, but this is probably a sign from the makers who wanted to pretend like he's Sauron, so that Adar's character remains two-sided for the viewers. In my opinion, Adar is either one of Morgoth's servants, like Sauron, or one of the Sauron's top commanders.
Why do the orcs call you father?
Seeing Adar's special behavior with the orcs in this sequence, we understand why orcs call Adar father. Maybe he himself created these orcs. We don't know at the moment. In this scene, we see for the first time that orcs have their own rituals and traditions in Tolkien's world. A special pattern is engraved on their armor, and when one of them dies, an orc says something orcish.
Nampak Uglurshka.
Next, we see the people of the Southland that moved to the old watchtower. It is good to pay attention to the fact that the people of the Southland are shown to be filthy and dirty, and this is not because the people are inferior race in Tolkien's world. On the other side, we also have Númenóreans who happen to be advanced and civilized human race. The filth of Southland people can be an indication that they were allies with Sauron in past and were defeated in war, therefore they are miserable and losers. In the next sequence we see Celebrimbor's Pharens, which is being built at high speed. This speed is either due to the high power of the elves or showrunners made a mistake in timing, because Galadriel has been in Númenor for a few days. But on the other hand, the progress of the Pharens shows that it seems as if several months have passed. Through the dialogue between Elrond and Celebrimbor, we see that Celebrimbor refers to Elrond's father.
What? Nothing. Just for a moment standing there, you were the very image of your father.
In fact, Elrond's father is a legendary character in Tolkien's world, because when Morgoth was mighty and winning the war, Elrond's father went to Valinor alone and asked the Valar for help. The Valar also respond to his request and helped men and elves. In the next scene, we see Elrond going to Khazad-dûm to find out the secret that the dwarves are trying to hide. When we see Durin and Disa talking on the bridge, we notice the technique that Hitchcock first used in Vertigo, the dolly zoom out. This technique is such that the camera moves forward at the same time, but the camera lens zooms out, thus changing in perspective. We saw this happening in the first part of the Lord of the Rings trilogy. The director cleverly uses this technique to convey Elrond's ability to focus on one voice. When Elrond goes to the secret mine, we see the mithril ore for the first time. The mithril ore that Durin is mining is the same stone that Bilbo's armor is made of in Hobbits, and that armor goes to Frodo in the trilogy. Mithril was extremely rare by the end of the Third Age, as it was found only in Khazad-dûm. The dwarves mined for mithril too greedily and too deep, ultimately releasing a Balrog. Once it destroyed the kingdom of the dwarves at Khazad-dûm, Middle-earth's only source of new mithril ore was cut off. After Durin and Elrond's conversation ends, when Elrond finally finds out about the mithril extraction, the ground shakes and a loud voice is heard among other voices, which is most likely the voice of Balrog. In the following sequence, we see Eärien drawing a picture of Númenor Palace, and probably later Isildur and Elendil will build the city of Gondor from these drawings, or Eärien will be the architect of the city of Gondor herself. When we go to the Númenor prison, we hear a dialogue from Halbrand, who is telling Galadriel that it is better to know what your opponent is afraid of and give them a means to overcome this fear.
In an instance like this, it seems to me that you do well to identify what it is that your opponent most fears.
And exploit it.
So that you can overcome them yourself. This dialogue intensifies the speculation that Halbrand is Sauron. Halbrand has a story like Aragorn, because he is also a king in exile, who must find himself. Obviously, we can't be sure about Halbrand's identity. The negative point that is interesting in the prison sequence is how Galadriel throws 3 soldiers into the cell and escapes. If the creators wanted to show off the power of Galadriel, they should have shown us the shot including Galadriel trapping the soldiers. Next important point, Isildur and Eärien are talking and we notice painting on a wall beside them, picturing elves and men fighting a sea monster. This is another indication that Isildur will play an important role reuniting them. Later, when Galadriel and Miriel enter the ancient hall and the queen wants to show the Palantir to Galadriel, we see Narsil's sword in shot, which actually goes to Aragorn later, and its name will be Andoril. The Palantir orb that we see in this scene can be the orb in Lord of the Rings that Saruman found, or one of the orbs that Sauron holds and through which he communicates with Saruman. We will probably find out about this in next episode. However, it's certain that the Palantir may not show the truth, or that Sauron, like in Lord of the Rings trilogy, has done something to them to show the false fate.
Place your hand upon it.
Next, the Queen says that the prophecy began with the arrival of Galadriel, and a series of events are on the way that will cause the fall of Numenor. And she also points out that Numenor itself will only cause its fall. This refers to Numenor being deceived by Sauron in the future. On the other hand, from the Queen's words we understand that she believes in the elves like her father, and it is only because of political issues that she wants Galadriel to leave Numenor as soon as possible. This is the first place where we see that Galadriel is changing herself and wants to befriend the Queen and listens to Halbrand. In fact, we are seeing the first signs of Galadriel's growth and change here. Well, let's get to Theo's escape from the orcs. In this sequence we see a 2-minute long take. This is from the time Theo comes out of the well to the time an orc finds him. We don't see any cuts. With this technique, sense of fear is better conveyed to us, and it was a smart and appropriate choice from the makers. Another point that is important in this episode, and especially in this escape scene, is that the music is taking on a more prominent role, and its combination with slow motion has multiplied its impact. Shown in the trailer, we see that Arondir catches an arrow with his hand. This shows that the great power of Arondir and all the elves. Next, we see Durin's wife singing, which is kind of a religious ritual that they sing to the stones to return the people inside themselves that they imprisoned. Here we see that the rock particles are moving. This is not magic, because magic is not reachable for ordinary people in Tolkien's world, and probably the movement of the particles are due to the vibration of Disa's voice. Also, we see that the emotional connection between Elrond, Disa and Durin deepens, and Disa feels somehow indebted to Elrond. The fiery and angry Durin in this scene doesn't remind you of Gimli.
I will be dead before I see the ring in the hands of an elf!
Arondir delivers Odor's message to Bronwyn. It is possible that some people in Southland will accept Odor's offer and help him, and some people will fight him, like Bronwyn. When Theo is talking to Waldröv, we notice the character of the old man who wants to serve Sauron. He refers to the meteorite that we saw in first episode. He's probably prophesying that with the presence of this meteorite in the sky, the era of Sauron will begin.
It is to you and me, lad, to be ready.
Ready for what?
In the last scene, when we go back to Numenor, Queen Regent orders Galadriel to leave, but immediately after Galadriel leaves, the leaves of the white tree begin to fall. And this is the reason why the Queen changes her decision and orders to retain Galadriel and convinces her people to help the elves. Those who decide to aid Galadriel will move to Southlands, and those who stay, they are the ones who will be deceived by Sauron in the future and cause the fall of Numenor. In the end, if we see in the next episode that Halbrand did not go with Galadriel, it becomes more likely that he is Sauron. Tell us in the comment section, do you think Halbrand is Sauron?